demo will show you how you can visualize CloudTrail data in Amazon QuickSight in order to start building helpful security dashboards. I will start configuring CloudTrail from scratch. CloudTrail is actually enabled by default in every single AWS account, but you will see where the configurations on CloudTrail are made in case you have an AWS account with CloudTrail disabled. After enabling CloudTrail, I will add a secondary user into my AWS account. I will call that user Nicholas, and then I will log in as that user and do some activity simulating a user doing API calls, where one of those API calls will be accidentally turning off a web server that was being used in production. Then I will log out with the user I created and log in again as my administrator user. Then I will use CloudTrail data to discover what happened when the server was turned off, who turned off that web server, and also discover what other API calls were made by that same user, by that Nicholas user, right? Because that user could have been compromised. Usually the first thing that happens when accounts are compromised are people trying to change the password or API keys or trying to disable CloudTrail, right? We will see that on CloudTrail because CloudTrail logs both accepted and rejected API calls. Luckily, Nicholas won't be allowed to disable CloudTrail and either change his own password or do nothing with AWS IAM, or Identity Access Management. So let's get started. So this is an AWS account that I just created for this demo. It has nothing in this account. I created this account 5 minutes ago. And I'm logged in this account as the user admin, as you can see here on the upper right corner, okay? First thing that I would like to do is go into CloudTrail to make sure that CloudTrail is enabled. So if you click here in services, it will show you all the AWS services, and there's more than 100. So because in this demo, we will be mostly working with Athena, CloudTrail, IAM, EC2, QuickSight, and S3, I added those as favorites. So if you click on this star that will pop up when you mouse over through the service name, you can add the specific service into this favorite bar here. So for example, if I want to work with Amazon Managed Blockchain, if I want to work with that a lot, a tip that I give you is put that on the favorites, and then you won't need to search for Amazon Managed Blockchain all the time in the service list. So let's go to CloudTrail. First service that I would like to show you, and we are in Virginia region, CloudTrail in Virginia region, and I already have a trail here, but just to make sure, I will create another one. So you can create multiple trails in CloudTrail because once you create a trail, you can choose an S3 bucket to log all the activity from that account into that bucket. And sometimes you may want to create in a bucket that belongs to a different AWS account. So it is very common for governance and compliance, specifically for companies that use multiple AWS accounts, it is very common to have multiple accounts logging the CloudTrail to the same bucket in a centralized account, right? So I can use an existing S3 bucket if I already had created an S3 bucket before to host all the files that I'm going to use for CloudTrail here, but CloudTrail gives me the option of creating a brand new, an empty S3 bucket for logging. I'm going to call this trail name default, and I'm going to give this name. It's a name that is suggested, and it puts a random hash because the bucket names, they must be globally unique. I can use encryption on this bucket. I won't enable encryption just to simplify things. And here are the options you can specify to configure and enable CloudTrail in an account. After I choose, I click next. And then it asks me, what do I want to log in that bucket? The more things I choose here, the more files will be created in the bucket, the more granular the information will be, right? So I am marking management events, which will capture management operations performed on the AWS resources, such as start an instance or delete an instance. An instance is a virtual machine, or create a bucket, delete a bucket, right? Create a database, things like that. So data events, they will actually log resource operations performed within a resource. In other words, if there is an existing resource like a bucket and someone deletes that bucket, or there is a specific virtual machine and someone changes the security configuration of that virtual machine, then this will also be logged. And insights is interesting. This is new in CloudTrail. CloudTrail already does a little bit of, it's not prescriptive analysis, but it identifies unusual activity. So it stores in the same bucket under a different folder, under a different prefix, events that are related to your account that are unusual. And this is interesting because CloudTrail can already have the ability of identify outliers in the data that is collecting and put that in the bucket for you. So I'm going to mark all of them. And here is where I choose what I want to do when for CloudTrail to store those events. I want to store them in an S3 bucket. And CloudTrail Insights, additional charges apply because it's doing some sort of machine learning for me under the hood. I have that enabled. And then next, I review everything, create trail. So this is the trail that I just created, and it will be logged in this specific S3 bucket. Pretty simple. If I go to S3, I will see that bucket, and then CloudTrail will start adding files into that bucket, right? So this is the bucket I just created, and you notice that you can create multiple trails as well, right? So I can create one trail that will log everything in a bucket in my account, and another trail that will create everything that happens in my account to another AWS account. And as I said, this multi-account logging strategy is very instrumental when you have multiple accounts, because there are some companies that want to separate their environments. Production, development, QA, dev, test, or there are the necessity of creating one account per developer. You can have the developers having their own account, but all the logging can be centralized in a bucket that belongs to a separate security AWS account, right? So this is how CloudTrail stores the data in S3. It stores in the folder or prefix AWS logs, then it adds your account ID. This is my account ID. And if you had multiple accounts providing data to the same bucket, CloudTrail would separate the prefixes per account. So you have the report per account. Then this is the CloudTrail Insights. There is nothing so far because I did not give time for CloudTrail to populate and maybe detect unusual activity. And here in CloudTrail, it separates per region and then timestamp, where it comes the year, the month, the day, and then there will be files corresponding to the API calls I am doing. Those files, they were just generated. And they were just generated including the information from S3 browsing that I am doing here in the console. So all this activity that I'm doing here in the console, like clicking around and navigating through the buckets, it is also logged by CloudTrail because I am doing API calls of the type list objects and list buckets, right? And another thing, when I am clicking around on the AWS Management Console, I am doing a bunch of API calls. So if I go here on EC2, which is the virtual machines, Elastic Compute Cloud EC2, and just by loading this screen, there are lots of API calls that were made. Because how do I know that I have 3 volumes? How do I know that I have 2 security groups? How do I know that I have 3 running instances? There were API calls made to the EC2 service to describe instances, to describe security groups, to describe volumes, right? So CloudTrail is logging each one of those operations separately in a JSON file. If I click here in instances, I'm going to see that I have 3 servers, 3 instances running, right? So let's say those are the web servers, right? Let's say those instances here, they are web servers. Okay, so when I am clicking around on the AWS Management Console, CloudTrail is already logging everything. If I go to IAM, which is the Identity Access Management, IAM, I am going to create a new user. And I'm going to click in Add User, and I'm going to call this user Nicholas. I will provide AWS Management Console access to Nicholas with a custom password, which I choose here, and I will disable the user must create a new password at the next signing. Next, I'm going to assign some permissions to Nicholas, and I'm going to do that by clicking here in Attach Existing Policies directly. And I'm going to give Nicholas EC2 full access and S3 full access, for example. So regarding those security policies, there is lots of things to be considered before giving someone administrator policies that, like I'm doing here, giving Nicholas EC2 everything and S3 everything. There is a whole security white paper. There are whole security best practices regarding those policies. But for the sake of the demo of having a separate user doing API calls and logging and seeing those log activity through Athena and QuickSight, I'm going to be giving Nicholas S3 and EC2 admin policy. And then review and create the user. So now I am going to copy this URL here, which is the URL this user will need to sign in. Copy. Then I'm going to close. And now I have two users, mine and Nicholas. Now let's log out and log in as Nicholas. Go to the URL. Ref analytics demo, Nicholas, and then the password. Sign in. Now I am logged as another user, user Nicholas, as you can see here on the upper right corner. And this user Nicholas is going to the EC2 console. And this user is also click here in instances. And let's say this user is going to instance state stop. And then, oh no, it turned off my web server. So potentially my website is now offline, right? So this user, that API call could have been intentionally, or it could have been inadvertently, right? So Nicholas' password may had an issue and then he let his computer logged in or something bad may have happened. There are also lots of security measurements you can take to prevent that from happening, right? And it is recommended to go after those policies. So now Nicholas is also going here on services, S3, and right now Nicholas is doing an API call called list buckets. And then, because Nicholas is authorized, Nicholas can see the buckets. Now Nicholas will go on CloudTrail because Nicholas wants to disable CloudTrail, right? To do nasty things in the account. This operation is not available because Nicholas does not have permissions to access this resource. Because when we created the user, we did not add permissions from Nicholas, for Nicholas to manage CloudTrail. And this is, for the security standpoint, this is extremely important. You should not give users permission to disable CloudTrail, right? And you should implement mechanisms for if someone disable CloudTrail, re-enable CloudTrail automatically, right? So Nicholas can do nothing with CloudTrail. Nicholas cannot see what are the trails, the event history, the dashboards, everything Nicholas clicks here. You can see that we can't find a match. Sorry, it will not happen. You're not authorized to do that. Now, another thing that Nicholas may try to do is to go to IAM to change his own password. And again, IAM is not authorized, right? So it fails on getting account summary, listing account aliases, and all the operations. So if Nicholas click here in users, you need permissions. You cannot see the users in this account. You cannot see the roles. You cannot see the policies. You cannot see the groups, right? So because our web server had been stopped, people are calling and people are complaining because the website is down. And then what we're going to do is actually log out as Nicholas, and I'm going to log back in as admin, as the initial user. Admin and my password. And now what I am going to do is actually go to S3 and go to my CloudTrail bucket. I want to see what was done in my account because CloudTrail logged all that activity. So I want to discover when that instance was stopped, who stopped that instance, what time, right? And from where that the IP address that instance was stopped. So I'm going to click in AWS CloudTrail logs, AWS logs, my account ID, CloudTrail, US East 1, which is the Virginia region, year, month, day, and then I have a bunch of compressed text files, right? Because this is what CloudTrail stores. Compressed text files. If you take one of those files and you open one of those files by clicking here in Object Actions, Open, this is what you will see. And I don't need to go that beyond to tell you that this is not an end-to-end data analytics solutions, right? Because it's hard to find information in all those compressed text log files here, right? If something weird happens to your AWS account, you would be in an urgency to discover what happened. And navigating through all those data when you need an insight, it may be complicated. So there is a better way to do it. And what we are going to do right now is configure Amazon Athena to query those data with SQL or SQL. So what we are going to do now is go to CloudTrail, because the easiest way to create the Amazon Athena table to work with CloudTrail data is actually through CloudTrail. So click here in Event History, and there is an option here called Create Athena Table. So you choose the bucket that you will want that Athena table to point to, and when you do that, it creates the Athena table setting that bucket as the table location. Remember when I said that the data is not stored in Athena? The data is still in S3. And you can see that the data is still in S3 because the Athena table will point to the S3 bucket, right? And these are all the fields of that file. So this file here is a JSON file that contains the curly braces and the brackets and everything. And it contains records, and then it breaks down because the format is always the same, and AWS already knows what is the format that CloudTrail pushes to S3. So it already creates the table mapping to that specific file, to that specific JSON, right? I just specify where are my CloudTrail logs, which sets the location here, and then I can click in Create Table. Now what this option is doing is creating an Amazon Athena table. And if I go to Athena, which is right here, or right here, right, you will see that there is an Amazon Athena table created, which is the table CloudTrail logs, AWS CloudTrail logs, and then this ID here. First thing that I should do when I go to Amazon Athena for the first time is to configure a bucket, an S3 bucket, that will be configured for Athena to store the query results. You will be doing queries here in Athena, and those queries may take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, half an hour to execute. It all depends on the data set you are querying against. And you don't want to keep waiting to see the query output on your AWS Management Console. Or you may have a solution that automatically integrates with Athena that does the queries under the hood for you. The thing is, Athena saves all the query results into, guess where? Amazon S3. Remember when I said that services provide integration with Amazon S3 to store the data they need in S3? So a bucket was already automatically created for us, and we can select that bucket, we can elect that bucket as the query results, as the Athena query results. So when we do an Athena query, Athena will store the query results in that bucket. We can encrypt those query results if we want, but for now, we're just going to choose that bucket and hit save. So here you see that you have a window where you can input, let me close this, where you can input things such as a query. And we can do a query like this one that I have here. So this query will select everything from a table, and we can copy the table name from here and paste the table name here, where event source equals ec2.amazonaws.com and request parameters like, and here we can copy paste the instance ID. So we can quickly go back to EC2, and it is important to open that in a new tab because I don't want to lose my text here. Then get the instances that are stopped, and I'm going to copy one of those instance IDs here, right? And then I'm going back to Athena, and I'm going to paste the instance ID. So what this is doing, and I'm ignoring the response elements equals that are not null. I only want response elements that were executed. In other words, I only want API calls that were satisfied. Because someone stopped that instance, that was an API call that got a satisfied request because the user was authorized. and I want to discover what CloudTrail gets for me in ec2.amazonaws.com as the event source, and request parameters containing that specific instance ID. Okay, so I am going to execute that by clicking on Run Query. Now, what Athena is actually doing, Athena is going on all that compressed text data, and you can see that this is way more friendly than having to parse, right, the information and having to look up the information in all this data. And this is just one of the files. You may have hundreds, thousands, or tens of thousands of compressed text files on S3. And what Athena did is, hey, I discovered something. I discovered that this specific user identity, and it is bringing me all the columns, event time, event source, event name, AWS region, because I did a select star. So I can see that something on console.ec2.aws, amazonaws.com was made for this instance ID, right? And the most important, I can see that this specific user made that call, all right? So having this user making that call is already an indicator that we are going to find out more information. So there is another query that I can do, which is select everything from this table, but now I want to filter for where user agent like console or everything containing console and user identity dot username like Nicholas, right? And this will give me every single API call that this user tried to do, right? If you already have CloudTrail running for a long time, you can also specify a date range here. It's SQL, it's SQL on top of compressed files on S3. That's basically what Athena is doing. So let me just double check user agent like console, because I know it was a console action because that user does not have programmatic access, and user identity dot username like Nicholas. All right, let's run this query and let's see what Athena brings to me. There are a bunch of calls, a bunch of API calls that were made by that specific IAM user, right? And here you can see what are the event name. Describe security groups, describe instance status, describe instances. So you can see what were all the activity made by Nicholas in the AWS Management Console, okay? So let's find a way to visualize that in QuickSight, because this information at that stage, I already know that what this user tried to do, but I would like to know more information. And I would like to know on a form of a charts, right? So for example, this is the most interesting one, access denied. And you know that CloudTrail also logs the events that were rejected, the events that the user tried to do, and the events that the user had not authorization of doing. And that's important because mostly based on that information, our prescriptive analysis, if we decide to build one, could see that and see, this user tried to change the password and this user tried to disable CloudTrail. It is very likely that this account is compromised, right? Or sometimes, oh no, this user just turned off the servers and inadvertently, let's take some security measurements to prevent these users on terminating instances in the future. So let's get this data that Amazon Athena gave me and let's plot that in charts in QuickSight.